Peace be upon you all. I'm Ahmed Sami, a software engineer working in that field almost for 4 years. If you are a technical or non-technical person, you sometimes when you are using internet, you hear this word cookies or sessions or some of the terms around you. So what is the difference between them and why we needed cookies or sessions in our daily life using internet? So first of all, let's ask the question why cookies or session are so important and why do we need them in fact. The reason why we need them is because we are using a protocol for communication between client side and server side. We call this protocol HTTP protocol, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. This HTTP protocol is stateless, which means that this protocol doesn't maintain or save any information between the request from the client and the response from the server. So each request and response sequence, we lose track of information about who is the user, what is going on, and what we need to do. For that reason, we invented what we call it cookies or session. Every one of them is used in a specific situation, but in general, they are providing a personalized experience and maintaining user session and information between sequence of response and request. So let's get into what is the common features between both of them. Why do we need both of them and how they are related? First of all, both of them, as we said, are used to manage the user state on web application. Also for information exchange between both of them, server side and the client side. We will get into the first term is cookies. What is cookie? Cookies are simply a small piece of data stored in the client browser. So this data aren't stored in the server side, but it is already in the browser side where you can see what is going on in front of you. Along with that, they are set along each request to the server. You send them back to the server to get some information to identify yourself, or depends on what information you would like to send to the server. Then the server will return them back to you on HTTP response header using the set cookie, or return them back with some manipulation. It depends on why you needed them. Commonly, they are used for session management, user tracking, if you would like to track the user between multiple requests, personalization sometimes, if you would like some specific information to send, to personalize who you are or what you want, and storing some user preferences along the request and response. We will get into a visual representation of how this cookie is work. First, we have the client side. Let's say that you are using the browser now, and we have the server side which you are interact with during the time. You send login, you get logged into the server, and the server will send you back response with the cookie after setting in the cookie on the header of the HTTP response. Then next time you send a request, this cookie will be associated with the request, getting back into the server to identify what kind of information you need on this server side. Then the server side will return the response to you back with some resources if you ask it for some resources, or regardless what are you interacting for between the server. That gets us into sessions. Each session is a single logical construct, is used especially to track the interaction between the server side and the client side on a multiple request, like going back and forth between both of them. We use session like session ID to identify who you are on multiple requests, to facilitate the easing and to avoid also the stateless problem with the HTTP protocol. Often that implemented using cookies, but in the same time we can even implement the session using another types of implementation without cookies, something like URL rewriting. URL rewriting is when you write URL and then you send with the URL a parameter which says, for example, session underscore ID, and then you send the session ID back to the server using a hidden form field inside your browser, your website, to send also the session back, using HTTP header to set specific field related to session ID, using the IP address and the same time with the browser or the agent as a combination. Like we get the IP address plus which browser, and then we send both of them back to the server using HTML5 as well. Web storage is similar to local storage in the browser for sending back and forth the session ID. Session ID, as you know, is mainly for maintain user-specific data across multiple requests within a single browsing session. What does it mean, single browsing session? Once you logged into application, the session will start. Once you log out, the session will end. Or if the session has some kind of timeout, so also that we call it one session only. Let's get into a visual representation of the flow. We have the same like cookies, we have the client side, we have the server side, we send login. Once you send login, you will get your session started, and you will create a session ID. Then the server will send back response to the client with cookies plus the session ID which you have now to starting your session. Then you will start interacting with this server by sending another request associated alongside with the session ID which you already maintaining. The server is going to check in the session storage on the server side. If that session ID existing, you will continue the flow. If it's not existing, it will send you like session timeout, for example, and please log in again to maintain a new session ID. That will take us, if everything is okay, you have a valid session ID, you will get your resources back with the response and case closed. Now you can continue interacting with the browser or with the server while you still maintaining this session ID. At the end, there is some difference between, let's put this here. Cool. There are some difference between the cookies and session. I put them into one slide for you to see. First one is the concept, the storage location. Cookies are stored in the browser, client side, session on server side. Data persistence. Clients cookies are stored the data in the client side for longer time as long as you didn't set the set timeout. If you set timeout, you can store the data till this timeout will be ending. But for the session, you have the data stored only until the session is finished, then the data will be lost. Limitation, the size of limitation. Size limitation of the cookies is less. It's stored only around 4 kilobytes, but the session is stored like objects because it's stored on the server side, which has better and larger storage location than the browser. For the security, because cookies stored on the client side, so maybe you are exposed to some cross-scripting attack. So the cookie is not always safe, is less secure. Someone could steal your information from that cookies, but the session is more secure because it's stored on the server side, which could be behind some firewall, strong security implementations, and so on. Implementation of cookies is simply by set cookies on a header, and that's it. Implementation of session ID, it's automatically on user logged in, or depends on how many types you saw in session implementation you can use to send. That was the difference between session and cookies, and how can you identify which is which and what is the difference between them, what is common between them. I hope the explanation was simple, easy. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comments below. I will be more than happy to answer your questions. Thank you so much for your time to watching the video. Was with you Ahmed Sami. Peace be upon you all.